Hello, you're watching news from Kazakhstan. It is Tuesday, October 2nd. I am Nurbek Savitakhunov. Works on pumping water from half the houses flooded by rains in Zhezkazgan are complete. Last weekend, according to different sources, around 30 to 100 buildings in one of the neighborhoods were damaged. There are casualties, 36-year-old woman and a 5-year-old child. The preliminary cause of death is electric shock. The flood resulted from an overflowing ditch. At least that is what rescuers claim. Details in the next report from the region.
Look, it is impossible to come into the house. Zhezkazgan resident Olga Yakovleva spent the night at her relative's house. Her house in Kostangilzi microregion is still in water. It was raining heavily and her garden was washed away by the flood. However, rescue teams are not hurrying to deal with the aftermath of the natural disaster. Last night it was raining so heavily that the water came knee-deep in our cottages, but nobody cares. Yesterday morning the emergency was announced. We were set to gather at school number 9. When we came, there was nobody from the city administration, just police officers who were making up the list of victims. No one can help us. The resident of Zhezkazgan, Fyodor Umrikhin, said that the water level in the house had been rising up to 4 o'clock in the morning. By dawn it had reached 40 centimeters and then began to recede, waiting desperately for help. We have to pump the water ourselves. Our friends are helping us. Luckily, they have some equipment. It is necessary to dig a little trench over there from the store to carry water away from these 5 and 6 houses. However, there is neither a suction pump nor an excavator. It is reported that the flood killed cattle. The exact number is still unknown. It is also unknown whether the government will compensate for the losses. Meanwhile, people have to get rid of the corpses themselves. Here are 40 corpses of cattle. They were on feed. Now nothing can be done. Even dogs probably will not eat this meat. It is reported that 32 houses were waterlogged, 55 people were evacuated, and 7 people were rescued. An emergency operations center was established in the city. However, the officials have not yet commented on the situation. I am busy at work right now. It is reported that the flood killed some people. Is the information accurate? 2 people were found dead. Police are currently investigating the reasons. The officials at the Department of Emergency Situations say the flood probably occurred because the rainwater overflowed a ditch between Kostangilzi and Bekbolatsai microregions. The authorities could have done everything in time. The ditch was completely clogged. If it had been cleaned in time, the flood would have been prevented. The ditch near the school was not clogged at all. There was no water, and here it was overflowing. They did not clean the ditch after that. By the end of the day, it was reported that the situation in Kostangilzi stabilized. Community services pumped the water. The power supply was restored. Protective works are being undertaken by rescue teams. The residents of Zhezkazgan have been provided with temporary shelter.
On Monday in Aktau, last word was given to the accused politician Vladimir Kozlov, social activist Serik Sapargali, and oilman Akshanat Aminov in the case of so-called incitement of social hatred. Judge Murzabekov then announced a week-long break. The estimated date of the verdict is October 8th. As to the speeches of the accused, the first to voice his last word was opposition leader Vladimir Kozlov. Alga party leader once again thanked all his colleagues and friends living in Kazakhstan and abroad and reiterated his innocence. Said Kozlov, "If I had hesitated for a bit, then it would be a betrayal of those who stood on Alan to protect their basic human rights."
Lawyers insist there is no components of crime in the actions of Kozlov, Sapargali and especially Aminov. But in his last word, to everyone's surprise, the oil worker who didn't say much during the entire trial admitted his guilt, asked for forgiveness and expressed regret for what he has done. Serik Sapargali also partially admitted his guilt, although he said that some Kazakh media outlets simply misinterpreted his words. The 60-year-old activist added that he is deeply saddened by the fact that his actions could have led to the death of several people. Vladimir Kozlov's attorney, Venera Sarsembina, who worked for many years in detective agencies, noted flaws in the investigators' work during the trial. She believes the charges are based on the guesswork and fantasies. The convictions were drawn out from the statements of witnesses who might still be under pressure from the investigators and thus can be biased. Also, the case has been artificially beefed up, since only 22 out of 62 volumes have at least something to do with defendants and only 17 have been used during the trial. What 63 investigators have been doing over the last 6 months is a mystery as well, says the lawyer. As a former detective, I know that any procedural delay has to be justified. In Semipalatinsk region, every such delay is treated as an extraordinary case. I've never seen or heard of a trial dragging out for 6 months and nothing being done about it. They didn't have any confrontation. The circumstances of the case haven't been properly investigated, but they did have a task to drag these 62 volumes for 6 months.
Дотащить этот 62 томов до суда. Касательно Сапаргали, то, что касается...
Concerning Serik Sapargali, the prosecution dropped the charges of inciting social hatred since they didn't find legally defined crime in his action. I asked the investigation to drop other charges as well and reclassify them. Though he did participate in the rally in Almaty near Imanov's monument, I asked not to make it part of the evidence. At the time, he was alone, didn't know Kozlov and Aminov, and therefore they can't say it was a crime committed by a group of people. That's why I requested to reclassify it.
Непосредственно Аминова, он на тот момент, когда выступал, не знал.
The trial on the case of inciting social hatred lasted 1.5 months. Many observers believe the case was fabricated purely for political motives, while the information blockade prevented activists from attending hearings. Oil workers' families were not present at the trial either, despite politician Kozlov, public activist Sapargali and activist Aminov fighting for their rights in the past. It was later revealed that law enforcement agencies advised journalists and residents against attending the trial, threatening them with possible problems and bringing charges against their family members for taking part in the riots. Two people who haven't missed a single hearing are the public activist Rasaral Kuanashalin and a communist from the Mangistar region, Nuriyash Abdreimova. Kuanashalin believes that Judge Murzabekov will pass a fair verdict, becoming even more optimistic after the president's advisor Yermuhamed Yurtazbayev said that 9 years is rather harsh and that Kozlov should receive a suspended sentence. It is not a coincidence that he voices his opinion on these matters. As a rule, he says what is advised to say. The most reasonable and fair decision would be to release all three of them. I feel sorry for Kazakhs. I want to advise our men against getting involved in politics, and Kozlov gained a lot of respect. He's a real man.
In other pressing news, more suspects in plotting terrorist acts are detained in Atyrau. Residents of Kyzylyga district Ibray Adir, Mirambek Zhankuatov and Makhambet Asagaliyev were charged with preparing acts of sabotage against the police and security services.
According to investigators, all three were involved in manufacturing explosives, and confiscated manuals and assembling makeshift bombs serve as evidence. In addition, the detainees had an air pistol as well as firearms and ammunition. According to the police, the suspects were stealing cattle to fund their criminal operation. At the same time, law enforcement officials didn't specify which terrorist attacks the detainees were involved in. Atyrau City Court issued an arrest warrant for 3 residents of Mialy village of Kyzylyga district. They are suspected of involvement in terrorist activities and were accordingly charged with terrorism under Article 233, Part 2.
In similar news, the fate of the surviving suspected terrorist after the raid in Kulsari is still unknown. Relatives of Aldiyar Saparov, including his mother, do not know of his whereabouts. To recap, Saparov was discharged 10 days after the raid in one of Kulsari's apartment buildings. It is known that the court sanctioned his arrest for a period of 2 months. Our journalist met with the suspect's relatives and visited the village where he is from.
This is a house of Saparov's family. Aldiyar has been living here with his mother and sister-in-law since July 2012, when they had to leave the village. The father didn't approve of his family members' interest in religion. Today, even the elder sister, who lives nearby, doesn't know about their whereabouts. Frankly speaking, I'm not in touch with them. Why should I be? Since they became so religious and started praying, we don't communicate anymore. At the beginning of this summer, the spouse and mother of Aldiyar took their papers from the village administration and health center. They refused to vaccinate their 1-year-old child, saying that it is a sin according to Islam. His mother started to cover her head as well as his spouse. They gave us a waiver saying that they won't do the vaccination. At the end of August, when the time came for children to go to school, Aldiyar's mother collected documents for her daughter-in-law and children and said that they were moving to Atyrau. Aldiyar studied in Beybar's school only up to 6th grade and proved himself a diligent student. Teachers say he studied well and continued his education at the specialized school for gifted children at the regional capital. The good reputation followed him there as well, but he had changed drastically once he entered college. He was a good kid, very calm and never did anything bad. When we saw him later, we wondered why such a good student started growing a beard. So we were even afraid of him at that point. After coming of age, Aldiyar often had issues with the police. According to his mother, police detained him 5 times last year alone. He was tortured and the police attempted to accuse him of making makeshift explosives. After that, Aldiyar went into hiding, would come home late, and in September 12, 2012, said final goodbyes to his family. According to Aldiar's mother, the attorney assigned by the investigators wasn't trusted. Although the family cannot afford an independent lawyer, they don't stop their struggle. As true Muslims, we do not give up easily and we will fight until the end. As Quran says, Allah puts His most beloved followers through trials. We consider everything that is happening with us such a trial, and we won't grieve over this at all. Friends say that Aldiar and his mother joined a band in Kazakhstan, Salafi sect, and that is why the police monitored them closely. However, law enforcement officials declined to comment on the matter and tried to avoid any contacts with the media.
On Monday, social activists made an appeal in the face of human rights activists and journalists on one of the websites to stop extrajudicial executions in Kazakhstan. They demand that the authorities of the country try those not killed in a special operation in Natarau, Aktobe, Almaty, Kulsari, and elsewhere. Relatives of the victims were also urged to be more active and demand a response from the government as to why were their loved ones killed.
In the last 2 years, murders were committed in Kinkiyak, Burunday, Aktobe, Aktau, Kulsari, Kızıldağ, Atarau, and Almaty. Over 40 people were killed. The public still doesn't know which crimes these people committed and why it was necessary to kill them without trial and investigation. The degree of guilt and punishment for the suspects must be defined by court only. We want to draw the attention of the state and people who lost their close ones. They still don't know why their family members were killed. I want to tell them, through the press, that they shouldn't remain silent. They have every right to demand clarification on why were their close ones killed and request an open trial.
Atarau court sanctioned the arrest of ex-member of parliament Amanjan Ruskali, brother of the former head of the region, Bergey Ruskaliyev. Investigators suspect him of acquiring 9 apartments from a construction company on false pretenses in 2008 and causing damage to a legal entity in the amount of $13,000.
It is reported that the criminal case was initiated on fraud charges with the arrest warrant issued for 2 months in absentia since Ruskaliyev's whereabouts are not known at the moment. The scandal involving Ruskaliyev brothers emerged the high-profile resignation of Bergey Ruskaliyev from his position of the Atarau region governor, supposedly due to poor health. Later, the media reported that the former official was arrested while trying to leave the country and allegedly placed under house arrest. The authorities didn't confirm the information, while his brother MP Amanjan Ruskaliyev stopped attending sessions in early September and then a few weeks later voluntarily left parliament for good. According to some reports, the brothers could have fled to London, where the family of Bergey Ruskaliyev resides permanently. In the meantime, some experts assume that the brothers and senior officials have cut a deal. Perhaps the president's chief of staff Aslan Musin left his chair on the condition that Ruskaliyevs could leave the country, since Bergey Ruskaliyev is rumored to be Musin's personal treasurer.
In more arrests, a new person may be involved in the case of the Ile Alatau National Park massacre. As reported by lawyer Yermurat Mukanov, the ex-candidate of the Aktobe local government, 30-year-old Nurken Muhammadkaliyev, is being investigated over his involvement in the crime.
Nurken Muhammadkaliyev was detained back on September 13th, 2 days after the police found a sawn-off hunting rifle in the trunk of his car. According to his lawyer, Muhammadkaliyev allegedly knew some of the men killed during the police operation in the Baganashil village, indicated by the records of his cell phone, which actually led the police to him. At the moment, the former MP candidate is charged with illegal possession of a firearm and also serves as witness in the case of Ile Alatau National Park massacre. At the same time, his lawyer says Muhammadkaliyev has nothing to do with the weapon found in his car. Still, his police career is likely over, while his family members working in state agencies were already kindly asked to resign based on the results of the recent certification. Previously, the Interior Ministry announced a search for 2 men involved in the Ile Alatau National Park murders, labeling both as extremists.
Border guard Vladislav Chelach, suspected of killing 14 fellow soldiers and a huntsman in May 2012 at Arkan-Kirgen border outpost, was indicted on 8 counts on Monday, October 1st. Vladislav's attorney, Toligan Berikazhanov, says the guard is accused of murder, theft of confidential documents, desertion, illegal possession of weapons, destruction of military property, and other counts. Meanwhile, in Karaganda, Vladislav's grandfather, Vladimir Chelach, says the video of his grandson's confession, recorded over the course of his psychological and psychiatric examination, is fake. Vladimir Chelach is convinced that the video captures his grandson's twin.
This video is fabricated. The person there is not my grandson. My grandson is very skinny, and this man has a much bigger complexion. Vladimir Chelach also used the opportunity to call on to the families of late soldiers, asking them to assist in conducting an unbiased investigation. For this to happen, it is necessary to tell others about unlawful actions of security officials. According to Chelach Sr., the family is still not allowed to see neither Vladislav nor the parents of killed border guards. What happened during the press briefing in Astana is outrageous. People were forced to accept unidentified corpses and bury them, but they refused. They were quietly escorted out through the back door and taken to the station to avoid the press. What does it tell us? It shows us lawless actions of the authorities. Instead of searching for real killers, they are putting pressure on the victims' families, and they don't even let us meet with each other. There were many cases when relatives of victims, for instance, a woman in Otarau region was removed from the train on her way to Astana to stop her from going there and proving she was given not her son's corpse for burial.
There are problems with genome expertise in Kazakhstan, admitted the justice minister during the government hour. The official most likely referred to the expertise conducted in Germany in the case of Vladislav Chelach. Answering MP's questions, Berik Imashev said, quote, "I guess I know which cases you mean. We have conducted such procedures in our country, but there are even more difficult types of expertise. This is when we have no other choice but to appeal to foreign centers."
On Monday, Berik Imashev was literally bombarded with questions. The vice speaker noted at the end of the meeting that the justice minister set a record by answering a total of 32 questions posed by MPs. He spoke in Russian, giving most answers, which led to the dissatisfaction of some of the parliamentarians. MP Araskul Asangazi asked the minister directly, when is he planning to speak in state language? In response, Imashev acknowledged the shortcomings and promised to improve his Kazakh within 6 months. We should be able to speak in Russian and Kazakh, but according to Constitution, everyone has the right to speak in the language he prefers as the most convenient to express himself. As a minister, I must admit, it is true that from a political perspective this is a weakness. You are absolutely right, and I admit that it is my substantial shortcoming. Later, Imashev has also faced reporters in the lobby. Among other questions, the minister was asked about the law on private detective services, and the official expressed concerns that there is no constitutional ground for such legislation. Whether the Justice Ministry will come to agreement with parties on all nuances is still not clear, but the bill will be drafted before the end of the year. Some people believe that oligarchs are supporting the bill because they have the money to pay for private detectives, and ordinary citizens don't, since they can't even afford good lawyers. The law enforcement are against this bill because they believe that it will violate the constitutional rights of citizens.
Associates of dissident Aron Atabek organized repair works in his house, where his family resides, over the weekend. Asar, which means universal help in Kazakh, was organized through social networks. Some people helped financially, others came to help in person. More details in the next report.
The old Kazakh custom was combined with modern communication techniques to make a call to help the family of poet Aron Atabek through social networks. During the last weekend of September, activists, politicians, as well as regular residents of Almaty and other regions gathered at the poet's house, collecting funds for purchasing construction materials. Certainly he's going to be glad and grateful. He has been extremely concerned about the course our life has taken recently. I just want to say that both of us are so grateful for what is happening here right now. And some people came from as far as Taras and other distant places, and I see many of them for the first time today. The poet himself, who has served 6 out of 18 years, he has been sentenced for organizing disturbances in Almaty outskirts, is now held at the detention facility in Karajal of the Karaganda region. Recently, the statement of Atabek and some other inmates appeared on the net, appealing to the Prosecutor General's Office, United Nations and the country's parliament, complaining about tortures by the prison's officers. The dissident's family even received an updated will. Thanks to social networks, we have gathered here, and I was very sorry to learn of the conditions our hero's family live in. We decided to come here and help them. Serikjan Mambitalin hopes that the popular action will attract the attention of other people. Many volunteers were shocked when they saw that the family of the rebellious poet lives in a house with a leaking roof. It is a shame for us as Kazakhs to see that while our informal leaders are imprisoned, their families live in poverty. We came here today as decent people who have been fighting for freedom and against unfairness. Nobody asked us to gather here. It's our free will.
Нас сюда никто не звал, мы пришли по собственному желанию.
I came here to support and help the Kazakh hero, Aron Atabek. The trial of Aron Atabek and other participants of Shandarak events caused a lot of criticism of observers at the time it happened. Now his comrades and spouse are planning to appeal for help to Amnesty International. The activists, along with their lawyers, want to analyze the poet's case and ensure his soonest release. On Tuesday, another action of support will take place in London, organized by a well-known musician, Alfiya Nakibekova. Aron Atabek's verses in Kazakh, Russian and English will be read during the event.
Finally, the first issue of renewed Russian Ogonyok magazine is now available in Kazakhstan. The magazine will include articles about Kazakh society and celebrity gossip. At the same time, the Kazakh press is experiencing a shutdown of Panorama newspaper and Gulzhan.org website, which raises questions among journalists and experts. More details next.
Kazakh journalists gathered at the Ogonyok, a century-old Russian edition, yet with already adapted name of Allow Kazakhstan, now will be published in Kazakhstan. The organizers do not comment on how much the investors paid for this new project, yet they outline the high-professional level of the team that would lead the edition to become self-sufficient within a year. Their partner, the editor from Moscow, Viktor Lashak, arrived in Almaty for the presentation. This is a heroic thespian magazine that used to be printed on blue cheap paper, with wood fibers seen through it. It was bound to be shut down, yet it managed to survive, despite the fact that its chief editor, Mikhail Koltsov, was shot or tortured to death. The new edition has replaced two old ones on the market. Independent journalist Sergei Dovanov sees nothing tragic about shutting down Kazakh newspaper Panorama and Gulzhan.org. He explains that it is good that the Business Review has found its intelligent reader, while the blocking media source of Gulzhan, Yergalieva, explained the underlying economic motives was deservingly brought to itself. The sponsor, the protection which funded and covered Gulzhan, began perceiving this website differently. Perhaps there was a conflict. That is why the website started crossing the line at some point. Whereas the head of journalists' union, Said Kazim Ataev, in fact did not trace the political motive. According to him, Panorama and Gulzhan.org were experiencing extreme financial difficulties. Moreover, the expert predicted 2 more editions to be shut down, saying that the new crisis will hit advertising budgets of major national media resources. It kept floating for a while and the staff would stick around, but many left to work for online editions. This is what caused it. The paper medium is difficult, considering all the printing expenses such as paper, printing, and even shipping. On Monday, 2 branches of government responded to the problem of another media source. Press secretary of the mayor of Almaty, Sergei Kuyan, said in his interview to the online edition that 12 out of 34 employees of Almaty TV channel decided not to resign. He insists there was no reason to make a fuss about the city administration interfering with the editorial policy, while the member of parliament, Murat Abenov, promised to look into the scandal around Almaty TV station. He was approached by disgruntled reporters, and now he is preparing an inquiry to the prosecutor general and the various ministries. Abenov sided with the resigned journalists, saying that the city administration may influence only the programs funded under the state order.
This is all we have time for now. Thank you for watching. See you tomorrow.